Welcome to Pixel Chasing, the podcast where we talk to fascinating people about the most exciting and disruptive trends affecting our world today. With a focus on innovation, science and technology, we engage with the trailblazers and influencers who are taking an active role in shaping our future and signposting the current winds of change. So whether you're walking the dog, looking for some background content for your workout, or are simply looking to learn from experts in their fields, there'll be something for you on Pixel Chasing. Welcome to Pixel Chasing. I am your host, Michael Marciano, and on today's episode, we are welcoming the one and only Duke Long, the godfather of PropTech. For those of you who are not aware of Duke, he is a 20-plus year veteran of commercial real estate industry. He is the broker and owner of the Duke Long Agency. He has invested in and advised and helped grow many of the latest technology companies focused on commercial real estate. He's an advisor, mentor, and the entrepreneur in residence for Secondary Century Ventures and the NAR Global Reach program. Furthermore, he has been asked by many well-known companies and associations such as CBRE, JLL, Colliers International, the National Association of Realtors, the International Council of Shopping Centres, and CoreNet, among others, to speak and present about the latest in commercial real estate technology. He attended Indiana University and is also a veteran of the United States Air Force. Today's conversation was free-flowing and touching on a wide number of topics. In fact, as soon as the Zoom link connected us, we started talking, and after realizing that this is how we were going to progress for the entirety of the conversation, I just pressed record. So you're going to be dropped into a conversation that's midway through, but don't worry, it gets clear pretty quickly, and hopefully you'll find a few things that take your interest, and most importantly, you'll enjoy. Thanks. I remember reading early on in the process here around how there was some young startups trying to raise capital, and they were saying, obviously historically, you put on your best suit and you'd be nervous. You get on the you go on the tube in England, you go on the subway in New York, and you go to this big sprawling office, and you're like, wow, and all the high rises. It's intimidating, and you go and someone shows you, and before you've had the meeting, the tone's been set. Who's in charge, who's the boss, and who's coming asking for what. Now you put in your Zoom. There's the VCs sitting in their pajamas, their kids running crazy, the dog's barking, they're a bit disheveled, they're human. And suddenly that conversation feels more equal. There's greater parity in the relationship. And obviously that benefits those who are seeking the capital, looking for jobs, etc. But it's definitely been a power change. And as we said a bit beforehand, you see it also conversationally. There are definitely conversations happening now that I'm having and seeing that just wouldn't happen in person. And this is the new normal. And I think it's benefiting those who historically were the underdog in those relationships, and I think it's quite a challenge for those who are now in power. How do you maintain control's the wrong word, but how do you maintain authority? How do you maintain the hierarchical relationship where there's a degree of subordination? Because it's definitely began to dissipate, and it's been almost 2 years now. It's definitely began to sort of reduce down to my colleagues. There's equality now.
I mean, our team is global, but we were always somewhat remote in a certain sense to begin with. And this accelerated what we were thinking about doing, which was having some online interaction along with being out and about, because we were never all in an office. That's not how we ever worked. But I think it's went too far now. I still, everybody says that, but you've got to be in a room. You got, we have meetings, and you got to get the vibe. You got to go throw axes and darts and play ping pong and all those weird things that everybody does, because that stuff still, if you have a certain relationship with somebody. I remember back in New York, one of the team members I met, there was a little bit of attitude and some of the stuff that I've written or whatever. And we went out and had pizza at lunch, and we're like the best dudes ever since. So there's some of that I think has been missing, right? Not that, you have preconceived notions, certainly with me on some of the stuff, but I just think it's like, once you you get in front of somebody, it's like, I got a couple of kids and we're doing this and we're doing that, then it humanizes them again. And I think that's kind of went away, unfortunately.
The question is ultimately, in all what we're all asking ourselves, is how much of that, what percentage of your time is that worth? If it is the catch up, the chin wag, the seeing how the kids are doing, there might be 5% of what we currently use the office for. And if so, what does that do to the built environment? What does it do to the office? Like, I agree. I popped into the office for the first time last month, and it was great catching up. But it was, as you say, it was interacting. And we referenced work, but it was having a few beers and just speaking and getting to know each other again. But I don't need that every day. And I think depending on maybe what you do or the extent that you need real time collaboration,
Yeah.
it feels like a vast amount of time can be had in these meetings. I've met more people in the pandemic than I have done in real
Oh,
life, and that's blown
yeah.
me away.
And I'm not going to complain and be one of those guys like, oh, I'm so busy, because that's just ridiculous. I pick up my own phone and get my own emails, but I literally had like 30 at one time, back to back to back to back to back. So as you say, maybe could I do that in New York when I'm running around all over the place? No, because you just physically can't. But also, what's the value? I mean, is there value? Is there not? Is there follow up? I mean, I know somebody that raised a $200 million fund completely from doing this, which is amazing to me. But also, they obviously had the credibility before they got on the thing. But I don't know if it's being old school thing where you've based your whole life on relationships, or, well, every business has that, right? You do business with people you like and who you want to be around and hang around. I remember when you and I were in London, right? We had never seen each other. You come walking up right to me. We kind of known each other. I'm like, what's up? Hey, there's a little bit of that, but now that I've met you and we were kind of hanging and talking, so I still think is it 5%? I think it's probably more than that, but you're right. I don't want to be in a cubicle all day. No one does. I mean, I can't imagine that being any kind, maybe there are people like that. I don't know. So I
What
don't
does
know
that mean? Like we're talking anecdotally about it, and it's easy to have a conversation now as we're both on these Zooms, but let's say it's 15%. Like organizationally, what does that mean? How do you mandate the 15%? How do you manage the 15%? Who comes in on that 15%? How much space do you need for the 15%? And what I'm seeing is there's no right answer. And you've seen a lot of the big tech companies sort of say one thing, then backtrack, and there's been almost like this unionization of staff saying, hold on, like we don't want that. Now what? Now we're passing the buck back to you. You can't mandate we come in. Now what are you going to do about it? And I'm yet to see, and maybe you've seen something different, a really cogent or really coherent strategy that addresses the recognition that in-person contact is important and it has value. But how do you manage that in a way which isn't purely authoritative, that allows flexibility, but in doing so still ensures the right people are coming in at the right time? It's hard.
Yeah, I see that, like the team that we have and some of the startups that I work with, they've hired people that they've never met, they've never interacted with, which I find fascinating and kind of cool and kind of, I don't know. I also think that those people crave a little bit of that interact. They want to be part of that team, and we're human beings and stuff. So to your question, who is important? I think everybody's important. I don't know how, like with us, where we got to be together. Maybe it's once every couple of months. So to your point, also, maybe that is the way, because we don't have to. I kind of liked when I was running around New York and nobody knew where I was or what I was doing. I enjoyed that. Everybody knows exactly where I'm at right now, right? They know I'm right here. And the next 3 hours, I've got 3 more, that's not entirely a bad thing either. I think I've got more work done if I actually work. So everybody that I've talked to, all the brokers that I see, it's definitely everybody's coming back and it's got to happen. And I'm like, yeah, that's because it's your pocketbook. But if you're someone who has to do that, and I've always been one of those nomads where if I have a laptop and Wi-Fi, I'm good to go, no matter where it is. Now, if I have to be somewhere and do that, but I saw a lot of that in startups even before this happened, where they felt like, okay, I can get some talent in X city, or because that's a really good engineer, because they're really hard to find right now and they're really expensive. That's cool. Be there, just do the work. And then they would like fly in from Texas and fly in from wherever and then be there. So I think that's probably the way it's going to be. I was already kind of in that environment anyway, and I enjoyed it. I enjoy a little bit of the anonymity, right? Where you're right, who you go in every day and there's some person there that, I'm unemployable anyway, so I couldn't deal with that. And everybody asked me, I got a funny thing. We were talking our big global team meeting. I don't know how many people are on there, and we had some fun. But they're like, they said, somebody asked about why did you get involved with Reach and the thing or whatever. And I said, first of all, I told them I was unemployable, and everybody started laughing. And I said, you're the only team that will have me. So there's a little bit of that camaraderie, right? It's like, hey, with the team thing. So it's been fascinating. I've met all the global people, but then at the same time, we haven't seen each other for almost 2 years. So it's just weird. I don't know. I don't know if I'm trying to make a point other than I'm just kind of, editorializing at this point.
Well, I
So
just think because we're all living it, as in we haven't come out the other side yet to reflect on what it was. So we're just sort of
yeah,
like mind dumping what's happening because there hasn't been
and
a resolution. And I'm not convinced there really is going to be a clear resolution to it. And I think we'll look back at this and go, well, that was the changing point where suddenly people really reflected on the value of time. Like when I think about the amount of times I traveled to meetings for something which could have been done easily over this process. Like,
yeah,
am I going to
see,
get on a train for half an
I
hour
was,
there
yeah,
to have a chat about something
see,
which can be done here?
bumping all over New York, and if you're going to have meetings, somebody's got to leave their building. I got to get on the 6, get on the queue. They got to get there. Where am I at? I've had people leaving in New York are like, look, I live on the Upper East Side. Well, I did live on the Upper East Side, a friend of mine too. And he's like, look, if it's all the way downtown, can we not make it a little bit closer? Which you're right, because it's from door to door is how much time. And then you have these other things where, and again, I said I burned out, where you're getting on an airplane, you're going through the airport. That takes a day. I don't care who you are. It takes a day. So how much of that, I don't miss any of that at all, by the way. Everybody loves to travel. Not the biggest fan, to be honest with you. It's kind of a grind. So have we accomplished more by not doing that? That's kind of interesting. Maybe we have, because as far as our business and what we're doing, we're killing it. We're cranking out. So, we can do it from here. I don't know what that says about us, but
Well, I think particularly and again, one needs to be careful when they speak, but like within the real estate market, often people like to say they're busy. I'm so busy. You have no idea how busy I am. I can't. And so much of that
yeah,
busyness is it's the movement around meetings. It's the things that actually make you feel like you're busy. It's like I know a lot of these early stage startups, the benefit of being in a co-working space is you felt busy. I'm busy. I'm going to the office. But actually, when you sort of extrapolate the time spent just walking places, what you're left with is actually a far more focused period of time. And I think what we're seeing now is that it's the wheat being separated from the chaff. Like actually, if you're not out always, running to a meeting, come back from a meeting, well, what are you doing? And so I think you're seeing people work far more effectively. I think it's harder to sort of hide. And I think we're seeing it in particularly obviously on the brokerage side, which you referenced. It's pretty empirical. What's your worth? And I think for
yeah.
some sectors, it's terrifying. For some, it is liberating. But we're going to see a shift and a churn around what is your value. And I think we'll move towards a far more analytical view of what good looks like. Do I need 5 brokers, or can one do it? If I need 5 people, and again, I'm not talking too much purely on the brokerage side, but it's a good example. If I have 5 people doing 5 viewings on 5 days, then you can do the equation. It's numbers. This half an hour here, hour there. Well, if we go towards a hybrid model of presenting property and we go through a more digitized process of the conveyancing, do you need 5 people? And if not, how do you attribute who's most valuable within those 5 people? So, as I say, I think in these markets, the best of anything will thrive, but the ones who have been fairly ordinary, I think they become quite visible.
Yeah, I talked to a friend of mine, Ryan Simonetti, the CEO of Convene, where all they basically do is business and meeting spaces, right? And I used to hang out at Club 75. I called it my kingdom. I love that place. They got devastated, obviously devastated, and they have been. But now, when I was talking to him, he's just the greatest dude. He's like, I think we're going to come back even better, because I see more value in let's all get together in a meeting space, right? Let's be that valuable things at that amount of time. Kind of like you're saying, where it's not, I don't need 5 people to do all this X. Let's just get these 4 people and do this, And I think there's kind of, as you're saying, who needs to be there? Who's most important? How many people, like if I go into an office, all I need is a chair, literally a chair. And where's the water and where's the facilities? That's all I need. I'm good to go. And my headphones. So I just, as you say, it's democratized everything. It's kind of pushed everything out. On the real estate side, I'm only hearing, I obviously know a lot of building owners, a lot of monster building owners, a lot of brokers. So obviously they're like, wait a minute, no, it can't be X, it can't be X. And you hear every day New York is gone, or, oh my goodness, we're coming back, or we're gone, or every day it's different. I have my own opinions about that, which aren't really that important other than just my personal experience. But there's no way, and they've kind of proven this. There's no way somebody's going to bust it on the train from Jersey for 45 minutes and then walk for 15 minutes and then get up in the elevator and then do it all again. And there's people that literally have done that for years. Where's the value in that now? Where is it? I don't see that at all. So I mean, in what was it, Jamie Dimon, some of these big, the bankers, like everybody has to be
Come
in.
back.
And I kind of get your point where it's like, come back in so I can dominate and tell you what you need to do and what's going on. And I don't know, maybe it'll get, especially on the startup side, I don't see any of that. On the broker side, I see a little bit of please make it come back to where it was because it was booming. Building owner side, maybe that's regional, some of these people shift their stuff. I don't see the tech piece going away from it because it's amenities, it's the tenant experience. If there are tenants, what is their experience now, right? And on and on. So it's just never ending. That's one of the things I love about the commercial real estate thing. Every day, it's just totally different and ridiculous. And the amount of money that's coming in, it's crazy and everything else. So the value of the person and the experience, I think it's always been there. I've been in some conversation where people like, look, the office experience is what we use to retain and recruit people. Okay, now what? Now what? You can't even go to the office now. So, those, and I've been in them, those big, literally marble on the floors and the walls and the ceilings, right? And they're gorgeous and beautiful views. I don't need to go there anymore. So how are you going to keep me there? So
And
I don't know if I have the answer to that. Again,
well, that requires fairly substantial introspection that not organizations are prepared for. Because you've run a business how you've always run it, and suddenly, as you referenced, we used our presence, our location, our brand, our amenities as a leverage. When that leverage, disappears, what are you left with? And ultimately, how quickly can you rebound from that? And I think, in addition to what you're saying, I think one point that's also fairly pertinent is that there's also now an opportunity cost to go into the office. There's one question, which is the value in going there. And I think we can all acknowledge that great space for the right time, for the right people is awesome. And I think definitely when you are doing certain things and it has great value. But the other question is, well, what am I not doing by being in the office? And as someone with a young family, I have enjoyed so much being at home, and there's value there. And again, everyone's circumstances are different, but maybe the person who used to wake up at 5 to get to the office now actually is doing yoga for half an hour. And as such, they start the day in a more balanced place, or someone's going for a swim or a run or visiting a relative. Things that felt impossible because of the structure of the office has now become real. And, it's like we've given people a taste of the drugs. Like we've given people this taste of this independence and freedom that's quite hard to draw back. Like people can go to the office, of course, but when you mandate or you encourage someone to come in, it's going to be at the cost of something else. At its very, very basic level, it's their time. Worst case scenario, it's the time of me to get up, get dressed, train, there and back. At a more sacrificial level, it's time with a partner. It's time with an elderly parent. It's time to maintain their physical health. And that needs to be weighed up now. And I think because it's been going for such a long time, and also because the pandemic itself was health orientated, people feel more aware of life and its value. So that's an extra element to consider when encouraging, mandating, supporting the movement of people back to a fairly structured day-to-day office life.
So, first of all, in my career, I think because I was able to, or I made it that way, where I consciously took a little more time, especially when my children were smaller. I thought I did. Who knows what they would say about that? Because I had a flexible thing, because I was in real estate and I was a broker and I didn't have to be in an office or whatever. What I think, as you kind of said, where you get to the point of the value of, okay, wait a minute, I can be so much more functional, so much more productive. And now let's say, okay, I can go to New York and I make New York money, right? Now I can live in Nashville and you're going to cut my salary. I'm living in Nashville. I'm in the middle of the Midwest right now. Everything is literally 10% of what it costs in New York, So there's that way back and forth. The reason I'm in New York is because that's where that's the center of the universe per se. I know every city thinks they are, but now I don't have to be there every day. So even people are like, when you going back? And I'm like, I'm going to come back, but am I going to be back there every day grinding like I used to? I don't think so. And I think a lot of people have realized that, as you say, why don't I stay out in Jersey and we can Zoom and I could still get more done. And I don't need to do all that. So I'm finding that part of it. And that's one of the reasons I haven't gone back to New York yet, because you want to pack yourself into the subway every day with all this stuff going on. It's bad enough way back when. So I think people have realized, like you said, I can live in Iowa and still do everything that I need to do. And if we need to meet up 4 or 5 times a year and I got to do an on-site, fine, let's go do that. And you're going to pay me a little bit less, fine. I got a dog, I got a big yard, I can do whatever. And maybe that's also a generational thing. I still know a lot of people. When I was in New York, down in some of the certain neighborhoods, they were cranking, right? The younger people and I get all that. But some of us, we're past that now. So I think a lot of people have said, hey, I could live here, and do the whole thing. And even regardless of some of the generational stuff, because the grind, I don't know. I love the energy. I love all that stuff. But, I had a good friend of mine said this, and I think everybody said, I love New York. I can't wait to get there. And I also can't wait to get out of there. Everybody says that, right? Because I was the same way. I'd be there for 3 weeks. I'm like, all right, I got to go somewhere. I just got to go see some green grass in a park or something.
But
So
a
I
lot
think
of
people, they
that,
get that drug.
they and the one thing that I sort of pontificate on is the fact that that energy is a response to everyone being there at the same time. And one thing that I wonder is, well, if there are 20% of people like you who feel that way, what does that mean to the sandwich shops, the cafes, the bars, the restaurants, which are the catalyst for the energy of the city?
Yeah.
And it's all well and saying, oh, I don't mind coming in 1 day a week. Well, if you were buying a sandwich 5 days a week, well, you've now taken away 8% of that person's revenue. So there's a direct knock-on effect on the infrastructure of these cities that
Absolutely.
if we all feel this way, even in a minimal capacity, what we come back to 1 day a week can't be what it was pre-pandemic. And so suddenly, you mentioned Iowa, you mentioned Nashville. Do we start seeing quote unquote secondary towns and cities becoming the new central hubs, where actually, as you mentioned, you have the big gardens, you have the better quality of life, good air, spaces to run around, cheaper housing, cheaper costs? Do they then become the hubs? And then if that is the case, and Manhattan and London and other central cities begin to lose their shine, do we ever go back to them? And this all sounds very doomsdayish, but there has to be a consequence in some capacity of people taking some time away from these, what have always been, as you say, center of the universe cities.
Yeah. And I had some really smart people that I, talked to. And I think always, even New York back in a certain time was no place you wanted to be. And all of a sudden, I used to call it adult Disneyland, right? Where it was just, it was fun to be running around. So maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe I would say, maybe it's a year, 2 years, 3. Some of those people want to go back and they'll start providing that environment again. As far as what happens to those other things, I agree. Because if I'm not there, when I was there at Rock Center, I literally had my phone. I'm like, okay, I've been there. I don't want to have a sandwich there. Or maybe there, maybe, just in my area of where I'm at. And I was there every day. Now I'm gone and everybody's gone. So when you come back, what is that? I'd love for it to be that way. I went back, I think it was in May, and I went out to dinner, this wonderful Italian place off of 46th and 3rd or somewhere. And I walked out, I was going to walk back to Rock Center. I could walk down Park Avenue and no cars anywhere. Now, that wasn't big time. That was when things were opening up and you didn't have to wear a mask. So that was even then. And I've heard the traffic's come back and stuff like that. So all of those restaurants that I used to hang out and run around, first of all, lunch and dinner in New York is a sport. And it's 100% a sport. And they were all packed all the time. I just don't know, how does that affect everything? I mean, it has to. You can't. I mean, some of those places have gone out of business. But will it come back? Will there be? I think they will. It won't take the shine off. There'll be everybody wants to go to the big city. Everyone wants to do that. As far as the outlying things, I mean, I'm originally from Indianapolis, which is in the Midwest. They think they're the center of the universe, right? They don't have to do anything. I remember I used to fly in. I'd look over. I'm like, that's a little bitty, especially after in New York. That doesn't mean it's not the center of the universe. I was born there, but there's everything you need is there. What other than an ocean or something like that? So with the internet and everything else, do they become more valuable? The housing prices are getting ridiculous now, comparative. So I think it's going to be both. Why not both? Maybe it helps both, right? And like London, I just got a thing. I can't with North London or something like that. I love London. There is no place like that on the planet in this weird cosmic way. I don't know. It's hard to explain London. I don't romanticize London. But how do you not have all of that that's been around since what? Centuries and centuries.
Mm.
And the pubs, first of all, there isn't a pub in London that I haven't loved. Every one of them is great. How about that environment? Some of those kinds of things. Is that going to go away? I don't think so. I think it'll come back maybe even stronger. Will it be different? Will I have to be there all the time? I don't know. Again, we're editorializing, but if I were 25, I'd be there now. I'd be there right now. If I had kids, I'd be like maybe thinking about what's the next phase. I'm getting ready to ramp up. I'm getting ahead. I'm going to have an edge. And, if I'm 40 or 45, am I? Maybe not so much. So maybe that's generational.
Well, I mean, but you've also got with the what you do on the VC side, you have got an outlook there. So have you seen any trends been catalyzed, or things that you were working on or you guys are talking about pre-pandemic that suddenly you look at it with a completely different lens on? Are you seeing from that startup community certain things? And I know there are things we can about data, we can talk about remote, but anything specific that you can point your finger to and say, this has really got me interested, more so than it would have done back in 2019?
God, that's a really good question. And I was thinking about this. And everybody says this, there are certain things that got accelerated and certain things that fell away. I think that there was more interest in this sector, in property and technology and things around it, fintech and insurance now, because people realize that there's certain environments, there's still a lot of value to that. I'm trying to think, I would say that the stuff that I focused on more has been more process things. Again, you're only shrinking time, not a big innovation thing. That's kind of a word. Maybe we can get that out later. It's a long story. It's like, okay, how do we make this more efficient? How do we make this better? How do we fix this process? And I use this example all the time. There's a company I know, they do mortgage stuff, institutional mortgage. And there's a piece of paper that somebody has to touch. 9 people have to touch before it can move forward. That doesn't mean that's a wrong thing, but people are trying to fix that for somebody. That makes that process time better or whatever. I think a lot of the stuff that people were just trying to throw out there, and I have all my points and opinions about it, that kind of went away. Was some of the virtual stuffs kind of went away because there were 1,000 of those people. Some of the blockchain stuff went away, which I think is great because I've been called on that. I went through all of it and looked at it a lot because I can't figure out how an asset that when Elon Musk decides he breathes, it goes up and down, that we're going to fix that to a property. Maybe we'll get there. That's okay. That's okay. But if I'm going to buy a $500,000 house, I don't want that to go down to 200,000 after a week. So some of that stuff went away. I don't know, just better teams, better ideas, and real usable products have always got funded. And I think this year we've invested more in startups than we had the previous year, which was a record, like in half a year. And it's literally billions every month. So I don't think I've answered your question. I don't know if anything's really went away. It's just everything that's better and actually people are buying has been more pushed to the front. Institutional mortgage stuff, processing software. I mean, I could go on and on. The building stuff, amenities, even that you think would go away. They went virtual and made it better. There's just so many things. And all the people that were buying houses, with NAR, I'm a little bit on the resi side. It's ridiculous, the boom that's going on there. I think the prices went up here in the United States. The average price was almost, I think they call it like 75,000 pounds. Your house went up that much in 1 year, right?
We had a similar thing here. You had a perfect storm. You have low interest rates. You have people who are hoarding cash for a long period of time with uncertainty towards the future. We had incentives on stamp duty, and people are buying.
Okay, so let me throw the question back to you. What have you seen? How's that for a question? You tell me what you think.
I think that what you're seeing is, and I'm going to want your view on this as well, is I think we're pretty both in agreement to whether it's Cree tech, prop tech, it's been a word for a very long time, and people can talk about innovation.
I should have trademarked them too.
come back in time
Everybody
and
wants
do
to
that.
take credit. I'll take credit.
Listen, only one Godfather can be around for that.
That's true. I don't have a problem with
But
that.
it's like, for me, it's a lot of noise, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of ego stroking for a long period of time without any meaningful change. And I think it's taken a seismic shift like this to see people not necessarily adopt, but go, okay, I acknowledge this is inevitable. And I think you saw yesterday JLL, acquiring Skyline. Like, that would have been something that we would have said, yes, should happen a few years ago, but wouldn't necessarily have done so. You saw
Okay, that's a
Cushman
good
putting
point.
$150
Yeah.
million into WeWork. So I want to know your view, whether you think these organizations have a plan, or they're like, right, look, we got to do something. Let's do a land grab and work it out after. But I think either way, it's not a bad thing. I think what we're
Okay.
seeing is an acknowledgement that there is now great tech out there. Do we know exactly how we're going to incorporate it? Maybe. But we know we want to play there. And my view is that pre-pandemic, there was still a lot of lip service, and there was activity. There were various funds and various investments, and we've seen that. But I just get the feeling anecdotally that there's a fear factor going on, that people recognize that things are moving so quickly. If we're not in it, we may not be in it much longer thereafter.
Okay, I got 2 or 3 answers to that. First of all, yes, there is that fear factor. First of all these people that are raising all this money, they have to deploy it, right? You see all the SPACs that are out there. If you have a SPAC, you have to say, we're going to get X. Well, how do you just raise money and maybe decide to go buy something? Why don't you figure out what you're going to buy first? That's my opinion about that. And then also the valuations are ridiculous, because you can't wave a wand all of a sudden and that one company is going to exponentially get their revenue to a certain level. At the startup level, when I say startup level, that can be, at certain phases, they might have 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 employees and still think they're a startup. A lot of those people are, and if you look at the stats, they're consolidating or trying to help each other. So they're trying to be a bigger company. You'd be surprised how many companies very small get to $1 million in ARR every year. So look, we can do, everybody thinks they're the platform, right? So there are a lot of companies throwing money at these platforms to try to get them up. I think a lot of people are looking at these segments like, if I'm in this, if I'm in mortgage, if I'm in this, then I'm making bets. So I agree with that very much so. The end result, and I've talked about this, so you're throwing 150 or $200 million at a company that's got 20 million in ARR. How many of those are going to make it? There's going to be a bubble. And I don't want to get all, oh, the sky's falling, but they're going to fail. Some of them are going to fail because the teams are not great. There's not enough customers. I could go on and on. So I think it's kind of those 3 answers to that. The ones that I'm working with right now, I mean, that's all I do every day is talk to them about, this customer, that customer, this scale, and this engineer, and all day long. That's what I talk about. And they all think they're going to make it. And I'm cheering. That's my job. Come on, let's go. And we're betting on all of them to make. We have 150 companies in our portfolio. Are they all going to make it? I couldn't say that I shouldn't say that they can't, but we know odds are they're not. So the other thing I was going to bring up is that some of these companies, depending on who's running the teams, they have delusions. Hey, I'm going to make, I literally had somebody tell me they're going to make $3 billion in revenue in 3 years. And I'm not going to say what I said to them out loud, but my part of it was, what do you need me for then? Right. So that's crazy. But they also, they're on a treadmill, right? We've raised X money. We have to hit X numbers. We have to do X. And some of them just burn out, or they can't get there, or they can't make it. So what do I do then? How do I get my investors' money back? How do I get them a profit? Sometimes it's an acquire. So I think that's a reason I've seen, I think last year and this year, the most ever with startups buying and merging with other startups. Okay. And then you've got that bigger money out there. So all the companies that I'm talking to, I hate to say this, but they're asking me about, well, if I raise this and I raise that, and they're like, well, we've been offered this. I said, take it. I mean, if it's there, take it. I was literally on one this morning, like, we're overprescribed. I'm like, take it. Because, that doesn't mean you have to spend it. Maybe that's a better narrative. So it's just been all those different parts and pieces. And that's depending, I think, where you are in the ecosystem. All these big hitter, real estate, we're going to get a SPAC and we're going to go buy this because we know all the ecosystem, and they can't find anything to buy. In the middle market, I think there's a lot more cohesiveness, and they're all trying to be the platform, right? And there's some really good customer bases and good dollars. You've seen some of those numbers pop out. There was one the other day that just blew my mind. And then you've got the smaller startups that are try to be there, right? They're evolving. They got great product. They're really doing good. But it's like, okay, I bang my head on the wall to go get sales for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, or I go buy some customers and buy some competitors and go X. That depends on the team and stuff like that. And I'm around that every day. What's the right answer to that? At the end, is it because they won because they've succeeded, they've got more money, they went SPAC? That helps the investors, obviously, and it helps the CEO because they rake money off the table. Does that mean they sustain and succeed? I was talking to the software team from Katera.
Mm-hmm.
How much did they raise? Right? Literally billions of dollars, and still couldn't figure it out. So I think it's at all different parts and pieces. It's just the end result. It seems like it evolves every year. I remember when VTS raised $1.4 million, I was like, oh my God.
Right.
And I know Nick and Ryan and all that. I'm like, and now it's what? Literally a $2 billion SPAC, a $900 million buy. And there's more unicorns now, I think, in Europe. It's like times 25 than it was 5 years ago, or some ridiculous number like that. That doesn't mean it's not valid. There's some great companies over there.
But this is obviously, I think, also indicative of broader, VC behavior, and this idea that there isn't always an alignment between what is good for the investor and good for the CEO and good for the wider industry. Because ultimately, as you referenced before, guys have money, we've got to spend it, we've got to invest it. The CEO's been racking his brains for 10 years. He's lost all his hair. His marriage is falling apart. He's remortgaged. He wants to get out. And suddenly you got two winners there, but actually the adoption never takes off and everyone sort of peters away. And so to what extent are we actually, and this is again cross-border, and you mentioned before that the stats are high 90% of startups fail. And you've seen hugely well-funded organizations, you also referenced, who have raised $100 million who have failed. But they didn't mind because money was spent. They always knew to take a risk. The founding team got their out and their exit and can now go and do further things. Are we seeing the same thing happen here? Because I can count on one hand the number of businesses who have started up globally within the real estate market, who have gone on to either fully independently do something great or didn't sell out to get an out. We're not seeing this very, very fertile. And I think there are a variety of reasons. I think one thing being, particularly in the commercial and to maybe a lesser degree in the resi side, there's not a big client base. You're not selling pens and everyone in the world needs pens. You've got, from a practical point of view, if you're working in the process side, which you mentioned earlier on, a handful of organizations manage the vast majority of those processes. So if they choose a proprietary software or they go it alone, that takes out all the other players. So it's actually I know people like to often reference, real estate, it is the world's biggest asset class. It makes it sound that therefore it's really, really addressable. But so much of that is held up in so few hands. And so actually this idea that there is a fertile ground for growing, scaling and exiting huge companies, well, it's not reality. No, it's not even close. The one thing that I would kind of, I want to bring up that we're looking at a lot, and we can get into some of these other pieces here, is everybody's talking about affordability, sustainability, and I know Europe's way ahead as far as what we're doing because we can burn the world and nobody cares. But somebody needs to look this up, and I don't want to quote wrong, but we need to build the equivalent of the square footage in Manhattan every month for the next 20 to 25 years just to keep up. So we're looking at construction a lot because it's so wasteful. It's the biggest, emissions thing and all that kind of stuff. So you would think there's a lot of opportunity there. And there is a lot of opportunity there. But to your point, there are legacy companies. I want to go back to that a little bit, where there are legacy companies in construction that because they've been there doing X and they've got that customer base that they can bring some of those things on. There's one, a friend of mine's got a company. He bought a company. All they were doing was mapping. And you're like, this is 2021. Can't you just pull up your phone and do that? Right. But they had a hell of a customer base and they were worth X amount of dollars. And that was kind of basically what they were doing. If you look on the construction side, you would think they're just everything under the sun. Maybe so, but maybe not so much. So even that, as much as that looks like it's an opportunity, there are only so many things, right, that you can say, we're going to X do with this process and that process. And now these companies, to your point, they're either raising literally billions to try to stay there, or they just don't get there, right? And a lot of to your point also, a lot of the CEOs and the startups that I deal with,
I had one of them tell me, he said, look, I'll sell this thing to the devil. They're little land sharks in that sense, and that's fine. But I still think there's a lot of opportunity in all that stuff, even though it's the monster asset class. Here's the other thing I've said: when all the people with all the money and all the buildings show up, what's going to happen? And I think that's what's happening right now, right? What can't Brookfield do that they want to do? What about Blackstone? What about Prologis? What can't they do if they really wanted to financially?
Exactly.
You know, and they could buy anything. So I just find all those things fast. And what are they picking out? Back to your other point, we're going to stake it at here, here, and here, and that's where we are, right? And we're going to be in this little pot right there. Are they all going to be profitable? No. I mean, it's just endless, man. The M&A activity has been kind of crazy lately.
Yeah.
The amount of money is insane, in a good way. I'm just trying to stand in the middle of some of it. I'm just being honest about it. So what is the end of it? I think it's like any other sector. I look a lot in the fintech area. I look a lot in the insurance tech area because underwriting and risk is a lot of part of this. The sustainability thing, again, big in Europe, starting to be big here. People literally raising funds just off of ESG and buildings, right? We're going to go help solve that problem. I'm like, tell me what that is. Well, we're going to figure that out, so it's always evolving. And I think there's a lot of money now that's starting to chase what I would call, I guess I might be biased, legitimate customer bases, not just, hey, you're right, we got this virtual 3D thing and everybody wants to see it. And it's really cool. And we'll all be having headsets on and like talking to each other. Maybe so. But that's not where you throw $100 million at, unless you're Bill Gates or somebody like that. Not in our business. Also, we're the only asset class we're the only kind of technology that wraps us a software product around an actual physical structure, right? Everybody else is selling tennis shoes or, HR apps or whatever, those kinds of things. So I think that's another unique piece that kind of brings to it. And I think we can kind of get there. Somebody asked me the other day about innovation, and I said, good friend of mine, big CEO, he's like, every company's supposed to innovate every day. So I still don't understand what innovation means.
100%.
Right? So what is innovation to you? What do you call it?
I think and this is it's an interesting point. I think those who require a definition for it haven't been doing it. Yeah, I mean, if you feel the need to acknowledge it as a separate entity to your day to day, then you guys are so far removed from that process. Just step aside. Innovation has to be ingrained in the culture of always improving, thinking critically, and not falling off the cliff. And particularly if you're an incumbent, like if you've got the market share, and I think anyone who runs a large organization should always have the fear of God in them. Because we've seen in every sector, in every industry, the mighty fall. And in this day and age, where, as you mentioned, there's so much access to capital, there's even less brand loyalty. If you're not innovating inherently in your day-to-day, eventually it catches up with you. It has to. Someone will come and do it better. They'll do it faster. They'll do it prettier. And I don't think anybody can stand behind their business and say, we don't need to because, or I'll have one person, that's my innovation guy. Let them get on with it. It has to be ingrained within the organization, and to that degree, there has to be fear. And I think, and that for me, the two go hand in hand. The fear of being usurped or underpinned should be driving innovation, as well as always looking to improve the service to your client base and going further and further and further. And if you just measure a business by its bottom line, by your P&L, by your dividends, you're missing the point. You should be measuring your business by how you innovate, how you grow your current offerings, and how you take more market share. And that isn't always measurable in dollars.
And the company, ironically, and you bring up a great point, the companies that I've seen that are the most successful are the legacy companies that do what you say. And to your point, the ones that are the most vulnerable are the legacy companies. Isn't that ironic, right? They're worried about all these startups coming and kicking their behinds, but they're also in the greatest position. So maybe that's why some of this money's being thrown at that stuff. If we don't do this, they're going to come and get us, and on and on and on. And I know all the startups think that they're going to get there. And we know they won't. But also the biggest thing that I've seen, the legacy companies, when I say legacy, that's a company that's been around, who knows, in this day and age, that's 3 years, but probably 10 or 15 or 20. And they've got some monster entity that was in X, and then they put on different parts and pieces. That seems to work still, and I think they have that customer base. A good friend of mine, this is his theory. you have that customer base and you know, come and get this, come and get this when you need it, come and get this when you need it, that's a good theory. You know, we have everything you need, but you're not going to need it every 5 seconds of every day, which is fine. So I've seen those work a lot. And even then, I think those companies are newer and they've been backed by some serious money. So I also, as you mentioned, some of those legacy companies have their software or their products already ingrained in a certain system. It's hard to break that up. Having said that, what keeps them there? I've seen, and here's what I've been hearing a lot with some of the startups. They all say this, but it's like, look, where was this? I need this. Why didn't we have this? Okay. So that this is, if it's a visual thing, or if it's a processing thing, or if it's something that helps take the management of developing property from 3 months down to a week. You're like, where the hell has that been? You know, why didn't we have that before? So that I see those aha moments a lot, especially with the companies that we have. When I say we, or generally, like, okay, I can use that. I will pay for that. So I think that is something different than we had, what, 10 or 15 years ago, right? Where it was just an Excel, you know, a fancy Excel spreadsheet. Now it's just what? Fancy code. So what is that next level? So I want to ask you that question. Okay. What do you think beyond Excel? Okay. Now we're in the whole SaaS thing. And now we even got companies getting out of SaaS, because yes, SaaS is a way to get revenue, recurring revenue and money. But what if your companies only need you X amount of time? You know, I have companies going down both paths. So what do you think is the next?
So there are a few things here, and I want to sort of link it into, just talk about your earlier point, this idea that one thing I don't think, and it's applicable in most industries, but it feels fairly prevalent in the real estate one, is that people think if they build a solution, there'll be the adoption. There is a lack of appreciation of how hard it is to sell. Now, there are two parts to the sell. One is actually selling the value to people who may not have been used to understanding why they need the value, but that can be overcome with good salesmanship. The harder piece is who can be asked to underpin software that's been in their organization for 15 years. I need to see a huge upside to have to go and dig into all the weeds. It's been locked up for decades. No one even knows what's there. The guy who built it died 15 years ago. We've ignored it. And now to adopt what I can see now is a good solution, I'm going through a lot of pain. So unless you're going to handhold the whole way through, and which you are, it's going to take me 2 years to do. Actually, I can't be bothered for that. That's where often the friction is. If no one's disputing you've got a good solution, but what you didn't factor in was that to adopt your solution, unless I think something brand new, I'll go get rid of an old one. And you know what? A lot of people, because put it this way, in a good market, why am I going to change? In the bad market, it's very risky to change. So ultimately, when you're going to catch those people to change systems, I think that's one fundamental issue that isn't always appreciated, which the incumbents have benefit, and the good incumbents will use their legacy products, have an ear to the ground on innovation, and work out smart ways of incorporating and saying, hey, look, I know that startup there is offering you this. Don't worry. It's coming soon, and we're learning from that. And ultimately, stick with us. We're ready with you. And that's a huge issue. There are I've seen awesome products. They can't get adopted, not because they're bad products, but they spent all the money on development. They never thought about the actual connectivity issue. They haven't built teams to do the whole hand-holding exercises. People are scared of change, and these are people who've run departments for 20 years who don't know what an API is. So that was my first point. I think it's often underappreciated. With regard to your second point, I think people have always enjoyed, whether from a VC perspective or from an individual company perspective, they love SaaS because it's that recurring revenue. You know, I can bank it, I know it's coming. And in my view, that encourages lazy thinking. Yeah, and again, it comes back to the innovation point. If all we want to do is secure revenue for the benefit of an illusion of growth and success, you're kicking the can down the road. I subscribe in my life to a number of applications which, take Netflix. Netflix I pay for, I'm not locked in, I can cancel any time. But I renew it. Why? Because I see value. So I think as an organization, you should trust your products and innovation, which are inherently intertwined, and your roadmap and your delivery and your team, so much so that you should allow your clients to buy it how they want to. Because if it turns out, when you give them the offer, they'll go, thank God I'm out, I only want, a month. Well, you've dropped the curtain. That was always there, but you hadn't locked in fictitiously. Now, obviously, that has huge implications for organizations, but for me, in an ideal world, any organization should back themselves to the extent where they're prepared to offer flexibility for their products. And if products aren't being adopted or paid for, that should be cause for concern, but then trigger discovery. How do we make it so that people want to buy more? So I'm not a fan of being complacent and relying on revenue, because ultimately all it means is that when you come to that renewal conversation, they go, okay, now I'm going to leave. You have me locked in for 9 months. I paid for it, but now I'm going to leave. And then it's too late. So we had to be, we had to back ourselves.
Well, I had a couple of companies that I'm dealing with this year, and we went through that entire process. I mean, one of them had a great subscription rate, right? And they were like, maybe we want to go here because we can do X. And what we found out was they could do both. Another one was giving up that monster, to go to the subscription thing. And guess what they found out? Right now, they kind of need to do both. So we're going through, that's kind of the evolution of the companies and what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I want to go back to something that just kind of hit my mind. You were talking about all these different uses and stuff. And here we are, this big monster global VC still of all. And I said this to the team, we're out selling SaaS and all these special products things. And what kind of products are we using even as a team that we have? We have an Excel master sheet that everybody looks at, right? And I'll admit it. So there's a reason Bill Gates is as rich as he is, right? Because it still works. And I'm not going to it still helps us all we got Asana, we got Slack, we got all kinds of stuff, but we still go to that master sheet just because it's a nice place to reference. So, and if you're running a portfolio of X, you're using Yardi, you're not going to leave Yardi. You're just not, because it's got we got everything. They're buying stuff left, right, or MRI. Yeah. Right. We got active. MRI. Okay. And tell me why we should change. Well, because we're smarter than everybody that ever came before us. Okay, fine. I had somebody, we talked about scale. I want to bring that up a little bit, where somebody said, okay, if I go out and sell this software, I can scale it a lot quicker. I said, so what scale do you? What if I give you 1,000 buildings? 1,000 right now? I can call somebody and get 1,000 buildings. How long is it going to take you to onboard those? Well, we could do, 3 or 4 a month. I said, okay, divide that by 1,000. I said, if you can't do it in like that, then what is your level of scale? You're not going to change what they're doing with 1,000 buildings, right? Or how about 100? There's a lot of companies that own 100. There's a lot of companies, corporate companies, that own 10 or 15,000 locations, right? So I said, how are you going to help them at all if you can do 2 or 3 a month? Or maybe we'll figure it out. And we're past this now, thank God, and I had this from a big major owner in New York, like, why am I the pilot for every software company? Why don't they bring me what I need and I'll pay them for it? And I'm like, I agree with you. You haven't even figured it out yet, and you're trying to get X company to just think of the big tower in New York to do that for you. They're not going to do that. That's not their job. So there's a lot of those things that have kind of went away. Back to the kind of parts that you were saying, where like all these, I would say we're getting better at it. Some of the teams are better at it. Some of the teams are learning more. They are in the business. They've been in the business. It wasn't like it was before, where it's just, a little bit of whatever. And I think they've also seen that, again, there's a lot of money to throw at this part of the, the global ecosystem. And okay, but what are we really fixing? What are we figuring out? What are we doing to the point of down the road? These companies have got to be solving what problems? Who's solving the affordability problem? Who's solving the ESG problem? Who's solving the tenant experience problem? Who's solving the fact that it takes me 6 months to buy a commercial building? Well, maybe it should be 6 months, but maybe we can do it in 6 days. What are those bigger problems? And I think people think they're solving them, but are they really? I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of, again, trying to ask you, what do you think now are some of those other bigger problems? I mean, are they solving them? What do you think they're solving?
I think we're at an inflection point, and this sort of brings us back to the point earlier around people knowing they should do something, but not quite what. It's like, we know the house on fire. I'm going to run away from the house, but where am I going? I don't know. Now, the fire one's a good example, because I think ESG is definitely up there. We're all seeing, as we speak today, the world is on fire. Yeah, there we've got floods in Europe, we've got fires in Greece and Turkey. There seems to be a real physical manifestation of the sense that the world isn't isn't liking what's going on, and the extent to which you believe in climate change. The idea is that we ought to be doing more to preserve the planet for the beneficiaries that will come there after us. Now, we all know that, we feel that, but what does that mean? There are people doing stuff in it. There are people recording air quality. Cool, thank you. There are people doing carbon offset. Cool, thank you. And to your point, well, where do we all go with that? And I've seen loads of great companies doing a lot of interesting things, but for these things to work operationally, to your point before, it's not just the idea, it's the execution, and it's a multifaceted thing you need to solve. So first of all, am I solving an issue? It's a big if, and if you are, have you got a plan for delivering it? Because as we said before, it's a handful of people globally with varying interests and viewpoints who still, at the end of the day, they've got a bottom line to achieve. So how you can actually even transition that? And people can talk about buildings that, and I do believe we'll see a point where tenants will make a point, a young start will say, look, we only want to occupy buildings that have X, Y, and Z. I can see that. But that's a slow burn. In the interim, there are large landlords, institutions who have huge sums tied up in capital. Are they going to now retrofit all their buildings to reduce their CO2 emissions? Probably not. So again, to this point is you have a solution, but is there a meaningful and clear path to implement it? And I'm yet to see that. But I know inherently we're going to get there. I know we need to, and we know that buildings are responsible for, a huge amount. It's not often spoken about, but the built environment is a huge instigator for CO2 emissions and sort of catalyzing climate change. But it's a lot to do, and I've seen nobody come up with a solution.
And I came up with a certain level of scale of somebody, and to put it in perspective, I lived on the Upper East Side, and not everybody knows New York, but let's say from 55th up to 120th Street, from the park to the river. And I talked to this software person, and I said, look, every apartment in there, how long is it going to take you to get in every door? Just my block, just my block. So there's no way you can. I mean, I said, if you can figure that out, then we're going to own the world. And there's just no way, like you said, to retro and do all those things, to get all those, I hate the word stakeholders, but everyone that owns every one of those buildings. First of all, you can't even find them, much less get them to do X. Plus there's all these kinds of systems. So it's a humongous problem to kind of try to solve. I don't know. It's maybe it's beyond my scope, but I also think we have companies right now that are doing things that are like, look, we're just solving the leases for companies. They don't know what they have. They don't know where they have. They're paying rent on buildings they haven't been in for a year. That's how bad some of the things are. They're like, we can solve that and make $100 million. So there's still a lot of low hanging fruit to go out there and fix. We're talking about these bigger things that we can solve. I think some of these startups are like, we can just do that and still do really well.
I think so. And even still, it's even on the leases front, it's the fragmentation around the adoption. And as I say, I can count on one hand, somebody's been able to come in at a level that they've inserted themselves into the infrastructure of a large organization. And those who have done it, they've been doing it for 10 years. Yeah, this notion that I'm a young startup, I can raise X amount of money. And again, this is also a viewpoint I feel strongly about, and you guys also play a part in this, which is the misalignment of success and raising capital. That we give a full sense that success is indicative of whether or not you can get a check signed. And there are companies who have gone out to actually become profitable businesses without seeking outsource funding that no one talks about.
There's two ways to do it, and every company I'm dealing with, every conversation is about raising money. And I had a conversation with one last week. I said, why don't you just go get some customers? Right. And we were on a big call with the advisory thing or whatever. And we were saying this a very positive way. Go get some customers and make some money. That'll solve all your problems.
It's so simple.
To a CEO. That's exactly. And all the advisors on there were like, yeah. And they all have money in there. Like, go make money and make us money. Well, if I raise, it'll give me another 18 months. Well, maybe you shouldn't survive another 18 months.
Exactly. What's funny
that's hard to tell people, but it's like, that's just where it is, man.
People talk about startups like they're a new thing. Startups aren't a new thing, but historically you went to a bank and you put your house on the line.
Yeah.
that was your investment. You took out a loan and you were accountable.
Maybe it should be that way. Because if you're going to lose your ass, maybe you'll get up there and do it. Exactly. That doesn't mean these people are not trying really hard or not competent. Don't get me wrong. But it's like, it solves all your problems. So like, well, we got to put another 150 in. I'm like, well, then call your mom or call your parents or call yourself, however you got to do it. It's just, they're like, I'm going to wave a wand and poof, that solves your problem. But I get run up on that all the time.
And I wonder, because again, in the same vein, I share that view. It's that I think often things are quite simple. If what you're doing is, and of course, in cases there are real barriers to entry that require significant capital investment, I get that. But to your point, a lot of the time, it's validate your product. Like, I think we have some great people who can sell themselves, sell the vision, show a gap in the market, show opportunity, but they haven't to put themselves as the people there to do it. And raising money is a way to keep the illusion going. And again, why do most startups fail? Because to your point, most should never have been in business after the first 6 months. And if they had a finite amount of cash in the bank and they felt that pressure and that fear from day one, they would have gone off 6 months, you know what, it hasn't worked out, let's try something new. But because once you get the investors on board who put capital in, who ultimately still want to see it validate, and they'll go, listen, let's go raise it this amount, let's keep it going, we keep the illusion game going. And unfortunately, what that means, as you would have seen from those possibly you work with, is that pressure has an effect on those teams. You know, that's why you get these burnout. That's why you get these people who after 3 or 4 years who deep down, they know. Like you'll meet a founder, and it's funny, once they're a few years in, you can see through the facade. They'll give you the spiel and the elevator pitch, but when you get down to it, you can feel they're just fighting upstream. There's head above water to get to the next round. That's the goal isn't to satisfy customers. It's not to deliver, industry leading tech. It's get me to the next round. We need the next. It's the guy at the casino. He's always withdrawing cash in the hope that he's going to hit red. This not red. He's going to hit his number this time. He's going to hit his number. This is his time.
Well, here's the easy one: the companies that are X amount of revenue showed done in the product, and they have people lining up to give them money, right? And they're smart enough to get that done ahead of time. And it's just, you're right, it's easy to see. And the ones that aren't, and if you have 100 companies, how many? It's pretty easy. All of them actually are not going to make it. But I see that stuff every day. And what we went broad on this on a lot of different things. Bottom line is like, okay, how much money did you, we have companies, and we're actually going to have them help teach. They send me a thing every month and they tell me to the penny how much they have in the bank. They tell me what they failed at. They tell me why they didn't get that customer. This is where we're going with this. This is our pipeline. Can you help me here? I'm on, see, at least I know they're trying, and they're not just because they tell me what they're failing at, but it's like, okay, all right, figure that. And the other thing is some of the companies we've had success with other companies. So we're like, hey, look at this. And maybe you can go down here a little bit because they figured it out. And we've had exits and all those kinds of things. So those are the teams that we know are going to make it. We try to bet on those kinds of things. Is it hard? Yes. Is it easy? No. I mean, is it fun? It's crazy. But I've said this 1,000 times. A 4th grade child can come up with a valuation for any company any day. And your delusions of what that are ridiculous. How much money you have in the bank for the next 9 months, the next 18 months, because that's the treadmill you're on. And if you don't make it to 9 or 18, then you're off the treadmill, and that's kind of the thing. You're right. It's like, okay, after 6 months, you kind of know. After a year, you kind of know, and then we're going to get there. We're going to make it. Of course, we think we're betting all the good ones.
What patterns have you seen in teams or partners, organizations that have come to you guys that have gone and made it? Is there a very clear consistency in their approach? They come to you saying, we need money, and here's exactly why we need money. We know what we're going to do with it. Or is it actually the ones who are just so vivacious and outgoing and passionate, they bring everyone with you?
And you know what? I want to say I teach that because I hate to think like I'm some teacher. I literally coach them on, okay, this is how you need to put this in front of X, or it's not going to be there. We go through pitches all the time. And, we're obviously a VC in private equity. So we're also, and if you're going to pitch it to us, then that's bullshit. I'm not going to listen to that. So I would say, to answer it as succinctly as I can, that they are showing all transparency to a certain level. We've got this. We already have X amount of customers already. When we were early, not it took us 3 years, that we're early. We really got them now. And this is how we're going to go get these. They literally map them out and they give us spreadsheets. Here we go to spreadsheets again of their pipeline, right? Tell me where it's going to go, because I'm betting on you. I'm giving you chips and fuel to go do that. And again, they have people lining up. Those are the ones. If you just come in, it's like, I need another 750 check and I got my X. Nope. No, I'm not. I can't, it's just never going to be that way. Even then, they're not always going to get there, but they literally have They've said, okay, we're doing a pilot. We've got 40,000 doors. And then we're doing another pilot and we got 400,000 doors. I talked to a company that did that. When I say doors, because they can do the software. Okay, but they're already a pretty big company already. I'm a big company, they got some good ARR, but they're still raising because look, we got to get developers to get to here. Because if we get those 400,000 doors, this is what we got to do. Well, that's not too hard to get your checkbook out then, is it? Right? Because they've already proven it and already done it. And I know that's harder when you're younger, but hey, that's just the world that we live in. So those are the teams that a lot of people bet on. To get them to that point, you know, we're agnostic as far as the kind of rounds that we do, but we've also seen companies that were pre-revenue. We're like, that idea is great. That team is great. You know, but then they turn around and they get partnerships with people. So it's hard to explain. I mean, we're betting on that team. We're betting on those people. At the same time, you shouldn't. We should only bet on the ones that have already got the traction, already got the stuff, already got the customers. If I knew the answer to that, there's a fine line, right? I mean, there's not an exact science to it. So do I think those companies, both the companies I just explained are companies I'm working with now? I think they're both going to make it. What are the odds? Both of those teams, there's no way they don't make it. And maybe I'm very biased because I'm working with them really hard. But the markets that they're in, and I'm like, how do you not get there? It's kind of fascinating.
To what extent do you think your decades worth of experience allow you to have this perspective when advising companies and working with? Because obviously there's definitely somebody who's been through the motions, who understands the industries, who's gone through and has the scars on war wounds to prove it. They bring the extra level of insight and view. Do you think it makes you more effective at what you do? Do you think having not just gone through a business school and got checks written for you, and if so, is this the path that anyone putting money in should be doing?
So I don't think we've even looked at this. So I'm giving kind of the last couple of years of the companies we've got involved in. They all had industry credibility and experience beyond, right? And we've even had some of the people on our team. There's a big team that came out of a big company and they just wanted to take the software and they're like, I've never seen that work. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting, well, it's good to have diverse things. If I think of the teams that we have, they all came out of it. They were all in it for a decade or so. It wasn't like, hey, I couldn't sell my house and it's screwed up, so I'm going to fix it. I'm like, seriously, that's the idiot move, right? So those people, and I don't get demographic or whatever, they're all of a certain age, probably 30s, late 30s, even in their 40s, right? They all have teams. They all have, I hate to say this also, because we're all big on the diversity and stuff. They all have access to money, usually. And then we're big on trying to do a lot of other things. That's a big thing with NAR and Reach. But how do you not bet on those people? That's why you're betting on them, right? Had some kids that come out of business school with some bullshit idea because they were in college. Yeah, go lose your ass 3 times, and then maybe we'll get ready to talk. And the other thing I think that here's the interesting thing that I think I help with, and these teams already have, is they already understand their customer. They already, not only were they maybe one of those customers, they really understand them. And I've been in presentations where they have personas that are ridiculous and in a good way. It's like they literally have, this person goes out to these kind of restaurants. That's how deep they try to figure out their customer. If they're good, they do that. So that to me, they've been in the business, they've been in the industry, they've probably been the customer, or they understand them so well that they dig that deep. So does that make it easier? No, but that certainly gives them a leg up. Those are the ones I've seen. I don't think we bet on any, winging it, whatever. I don't know. You hear that? That's great press, right? To get that kind of stuff. Some young kid comes out and he's the next dude that's going to do Facebook. Yeah, I don't see any of that. And I hate to say that, you're not betting on those people, but those people that come out of those schools, they need to go into startups and figure out everything that's going on just in the startup sense. Not so much even the one. So that's a great question. I need to look that up. I would say the majority, probably all, come out of the business. I think I don't know.
It's very easy from the outside to say something should be done differently, but until you understand the reason why it hasn't, you're potentially, setting us up for failure. You've mentioned a few times in passing InsurTech and FinTech. Are you seeing, in your view, is the future of PropTech, CreTech, the convergence with these sectors? Is this the
All right.
inevitable movement we're seeing? Because given the fairly finite, in some elements, I know we haven't to discuss like Contech or other parts, but like when you look at maybe the transactional side or the ownership side, are you feeling there's a convergence happening, or it's going to
On the
happen?
transactional side, it's really easy. And not just because I, tweet stuff out or something, but of all the portfolio companies, I look at different things. So on the transaction side, let's kind of start there to begin with, and maybe not so much on the building and the maintenance side. If you are not a fintech company or acting like or being a fintech company, you're dead. You're done. Because Stripe can come and get you tomorrow. And those boys out of Dublin or whatever were brilliant what they did. But that's kind of the point. You're like, no, I'm in property tech. No, Stripe is going to kill you. Okay. And in theory, in model, I get where they're going. Here's where the platform, let's API. So you've got so much money that goes around the transaction part, right? And I've said this a million times on the transaction. So parts of those transactions, you can make money off of each one, but then you get into risk assessment, you get into location assessment, you get into transaction management, you get into the money, right? You get into cybersecurity. We got a company, all they did was give the software away, and they told the building owners, we're going to sell you insurance. And the building owners are like, no, you're not. And they're like, oh, yes, we are. And they're killing it, So they're like, they're an insurtech company. But we're NAR SCV. We gave it. They're great. So we've got one company just selling flood insurance, and you're like, what? So you're like, how does that? It's ridiculous, and the regulations are changing, and I could go for an hour just about that. So if you're not especially on the transactional side, and maybe even on the brokerage side, I want to get there a little bit. If you're not a fintech company, you're dead. You're done. I'm going to come and get you tomorrow. Right. On the building side, on the building maintenance / portfolio management thing, that's more data. That's more, some of those things. I'm not saying that a fintech piece is not there. Listen to this. I'm going to throw away a pitch right here. Here's a free one. Okay. Company figured out how to use POS. You know what POS software is, right? At the cash register.
Yep.
They're using the POS software to pay the landlord's rent every day.
Through the transactions they're making from their business.
Yep.
Adds full transparency.
That's brilliant. We're all over that one, buddy. We're all over that one. We can't give them enough money. You see what I'm saying?
Well, that also touches on the point where you've got businesses who have online. If you're only gearing a company's rent by what they're taking on their physical stores, you're ignoring what they're making online. And so this idea that we look at the total turnover of a business.
That's an interesting piece. There's different parts there. Of course, the landlord's like, we should have it all, because without that brick and mortar, you wouldn't be making X.
Exactly.
Okay, but how about all the companies that started online and now have some brick and mortar? Right? Like, what was it, Warby Parker or whatever? It's like they started completely online, the glasses.
I'm wearing them right now.
Okay, there you go. And I had them before I had my eyes fixed. And then they went physical. So should they pay that loan? They were making buku. And I know one of the original investors in that. Brilliant. So, there's a thing there. That's a really good point. I got to look that up a little bit more. I got to do a little more research. But if you're the landlord, and how do you know what's right or what's not right? You think they would have all that. It's in spreadsheets and BS, right? Total BS. But now it's like we're coming right out of the cash register, TI, rent, everything, every day, right to you, right to your bank account. And if you're a landlord, you're like, where was this? See, we went back to, where was this 5 years ago? Well, it didn't exist. Well, it didn't give it to me. See? So that one, God, that was brilliant. We're all over that one. That's a pretty simple one. And you're like, how do they become, as we go back to the conversation, the big one, the this, the that? I don't know. Maybe they just make money doing that. Somebody's going to buy them out. No doubt about it. So is that a prop tech company? Is that a POS retail company? Is that a fintech company? I know the CEO, we think it's a fintech company. And
as you say, it touches the physical space, and this is the point of the question: is that if we look at things one dimensionally, we look at things with blinkers on, we miss the broad opportunity here. And I think, as you have sort of alluded to and overtly communicated, this is a fact. If you're thinking purely in one dimension, you're missing opportunity here. And I think that's one thing, at least from what I'm seeing, hearing, isn't spoken about more clearly, or there aren't more conversations linking. You mentioned there are a lot of partnerships happening we see in the industry, all very sort of generally, at least from what I'm seeing, real estate. We haven't yet fully seen that moving further afield and the branching out. But I think the point you mentioned, that company sounds fascinating. I feel that we could sit and talk for hours, and ultimately the data shows that after around an hour, people switch off, even when you've got the Godfather.
Good luck editing this thing.
Oh, I'm editing. It's going straight out. We didn't even do an intro. This is it. We're going to go.
Yeah, people are going to be like, no wonder nobody talks. No, we're just kind of riffing here. I love.
That's the point. That's how.
This is the conversation. Here's the other. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. This is the conversations you and I would have in the pub,
exactly.
Right? For a half hour over a wonderful Guinness, I might add.
Or five.
Depending on, what I got to, before we stop, the big thing I got into in this whole COVID thing is all of a sudden I'm really watching the English Premier League for some reason. Because I had nothing else to watch. It's on early in the morning. I'm not going to say what team I'm for, because I know that gets, people get all crazy. I'll tell you two things. I watch Harry Kane and the American Pusely. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, Harry Kane is also currently a very hot topic. So, even though you are on a good day a diversive character, we don't want to get people even more riled up by you.
There we go. You people are crazy about that stuff, which is wonderful. It's wonderful. But I enjoy actually watching the games. I'm kind of into it. I'm like, wow, it's kind of my new thing. I'm not going to get a shirt or anything because I don't want to go to London and get killed. But it's like, it's been kind of fascinating and fun. Even though we're stuck in our places, we're still global, and that's kind of how I look at it.
Next time we'll get you a shirt next time you come. Next time you pop over. And again, why are you going to pop over? Maybe for an event, maybe for a chinwag. Either way, when you come over, I'll make sure that someone greets you somewhere with a shirt. And then before we sign off, when can we expect the website back up? You mentioned it's been taken down. When? Never. What about your ramblings and your thoughts? Where do you see the best place?
I don't know. I kind of burned out. The other thing is I'm part of a big global team, and there's some things you just shouldn't be. So I got away with murder, right? I got away with
metaphorically speaking, for
metaphorically speaking.
And maybe
stuff
once,
I said. Maybe could I say that now? Could I say that stuff now and get away with it? Do you think? In the world that we live in?
But this is the point. That's a different question. Should you and could you? I think you should. Yeah. Could you? Probably not. And I think this day and age,
here's
everything
the thing.
is being picked up on.
The stuff where I wrote about all the white dudes screwing everything up. Well, of course that plays, right? But God forbid I should have an opinion about something else. If I just rip on the old white guys all the time because I'm a white dude and I can, that's great. I don't know. I just, I wrote over 1,200 articles, believe it or not. If you call them articles, they're just trash. I just kind of burned out. And somebody asked me if I'd pull my archives up and put them out. And I'm like, you can't pay me enough because my career would probably be over.
You see people now being, and this is a whole different conversation, one not for today, but you see people being fired for things they said when they were like 9 years old.
That's ridiculous.
And 10, 11 years old as well. And look, people change. Look, some things are inherently bad, and we can acknowledge that. And some things are of a time and a place, and some things are confusing. And some things in that context seem terrible. But
I said this the first couple of years that I said stuff. There isn't anything that I haven't said that I should, everything. I said everything wrong publicly to the whole world. Here it is, and come and look at it. If I did that today, I wouldn't last 5 seconds. No. I wouldn't. I don't know. You're right. I should be able to do that, but I just don't. I don't know. I was making some money off that thing too, but it doesn't matter. I don't know. Stuff like this is better, right?
Well,
conversations like this.
The way to look at it, though, it's the way I often look at things, and it's to a degree, it's the Steve Jobs way of looking backwards at your career and then retrospectively linking the dots, to how you got to where you were, and whether it was when he dropped out of college or when he took his calligraphy courses, and then ultimately, Apple were the first company to introduce, fonts into their work. Maybe with you, that was we look back at that, and that whole period of time of being overt and brash and abrasive and honest was the stepping stone to get you to where you are now, which is investing in global companies, and therefore it's ended.
I did love it though. God, it was a lot of fun. So what's your next big thing? What are you doing next?
I'm not going to lie. This is probably the pinnacle of my career, and I might retire after this, a one-on-one with.
Well, after you've had, you've peaked, dude, let's have a Guinness. Let's go watch a football game.
Football.
And then you're done. Go see your kids.
Honestly, I'm a happy man. And I think, and to your point, it's more like this. What I found quite liberating through the pandemic is actually the ease of access to people, and the interesting conversation you can have when you come out without an agenda. And so these sort of conversations beyond real estate are going to be really, really interesting for me. Real estate being that starting point, but the world is changing so much right now. I want to get as close to it as possible from all the different areas. So whether it's prop tech, whether it's fintech, whether it's ed tech, there is so much opportunity. There's loads of risk, and for a lot of people, it's a very scary time. But for the right people looking for opportunities, there's never been a more exciting time to disrupt or be part of really broad change. So I'm going to be hanging around those areas.
Yeah. Dude, I think you're ahead of a lot of people, man. I talk to a lot of people, and I just throw out BS, but you're way ahead on that stuff. And we need people that think like that, right? There's just more of that. And I'm one of those guys, I'm great with ideas and zero in execution. You know what I mean? You know who you are at a certain point, right?
100%.
So I got to fund all the people who can execute. That's just an obvious. It took me a while to get my brain there, but so I think there's a lot of cool stuff we can do. Well, look, I'm looking forward to coming over there anytime soon. I know you're not there now. Love London, love Paris, love Vienna, Helsinki. I froze to death. But other than that, especially in the Baltic Sea.
Creed Tech Prop Tech road trip. There you go. That can be a new initiative. Bring everyone, travel the built environment, change the world, save the environment, and get drunk in different countries.
What a life. Everybody's like, dude, you got the greatest life ever. I'm like, yeah, pretty much.
This all needs to happen.
I'm sorry, but yeah, I did it. Nice. All right. Well, I really appreciate it, dude. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for the time. Thank you for being on Pixel Chasing. And as I say, this will not be edited. I haven't got the time, the energy, or the capacity to do so. So we're going to go out to our audience with a genuine conversation, which I have no doubt people enjoy. And if I get sued, I'm going your direction first.
Fine. Not one F-bomb. Think about it.
Yeah. That very
nope.
There might have been. Was there an S bomb? There might have been a bomb. I don't know.
An S bomb. I'm doing so good lately.
It's like a 12-step program for you. Well done. We got one of those coins that you get after being like 12 days sober.
We can ramble on. Somebody sent me an email one day, and they're like, you're ruining the business and your standards. I literally wrote something with the F bomb every other word and sent it to their boss, because whose standards are we talking about? Your standards or my standards? That's politicizing. There's a whole other thing there. So I learned a lot doing that.
It's also like, again, after I'm going to shut up, or going to sign off, but it's also like, and again, this may not be the exact right comparison, but it's like, look, and saying a word without understanding why it's being said, it's very easy to pass judgment. If you're using the language in order to communicate or convey a point that is beyond the word itself, then it's really powerful. If you're calling people that to be derogatory and mean, yeah, okay. No. But if you're using it to demonstrate emphatically how you feel, then no, it doesn't bring anything down. It's a way of communication. Yeah, it's a way of communication. So if you're being oversensitive, potentially, if you've read it wrong, you need to look at it, in the manner in which it was construed. But this opens up a whole different world of free speech and dialogue, which and maybe you're not best placed to advise on without lawyers present. But I do think it's important to acknowledge. But thank you, and I look forward to catching up. And depending on the feedback, maybe there's a part 2, or just simply a Guinness version, which might be more exciting.
Let's do it. And I thank you so much for reaching out. I appreciate your time.
It is a pleasure. Take care, buddy.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Pixel Chasing, and well done for making it right to the end. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to share with others who you think may also enjoy it. And to be kept up to date with all they're up to here, you can always follow us on the usual channels. On Twitter, we are @PixelChasing. On Instagram, we are @PixelChasing. And if you want to join our newsletter to be kept up to date with all future episodes, you can join that on our website, which is pixelchasing.com. Thank you. See you next time.